What happens when the man you fall in love with burns your world to the ground? And what if he's the only one who can save you? Caught in the heat of forbidden glances, dangerous secrets, and love that refuses to play it safe? You're exactly where you belong. Welcome to Midnight Silk Romance Stories by K. Dion, where every story lingers, every heartbeat matters, and every connection burns just a little deeper. If you felt that pull, don't fight it. Tap like, hit subscribe, and step into a world where passion and power collide. One unforgettable story at a time. Your next obsession is just beginning.
The courtyard of the Gyeongseong International School buzzed with the low roar of lunchtime conversation. Students clustered in small groups under the ginkgo trees, their uniforms neat and pressed despite the humid Seoul afternoon. Amara Carter sat on the low stone wall near the basketball court, a paperback open in her hands. She wasn't really reading. The words blurred as she listened to the sounds around her. The quick bursts of Korean she was still learning to follow, the thump of a basketball, the laughter that sometimes made her wonder if it was about her. She heard the footsteps before she looked up. Slow, deliberate. A shadow stretched across her book. Well, look who it is. Seo Jin. He stood with his hands in the pockets of his blazer, two boys hovering just behind him like nervous satellites. His dark hair fell perfectly across his forehead, and his expression held the same smug confidence he wore every day. Amara closed her book, but didn't stand. "What do you want?" she asked calmly. Seo Jin tilted his head, as if considering the question. "I'm just wondering," he said, his voice loud enough for nearby students to hear, "why someone like you came all the way to Seoul." His friends snickered. Amara stared up at him. "To go to school. Same reason you're here." His mouth twitched. "You don't belong here," he said. There it was, the same line he'd used since her first week at the school. Some of the nearby students had gone quiet now, pretending not to listen. Amara slowly set the book beside her. "You say that every day," she replied. "You ever get tired of repeating yourself?" The boys behind him exchanged looks. Seo Jin's smile faded slightly. "You think you're funny?" he asked. "No," Amara said. "I think you're predictable." A ripple moved through the watching students. Seo Jin stepped closer, looming over her. His father's voice flashed through his mind without warning, cold, sharp, disappointed. "Weakness embarrasses this family. You will not be weak again." He clenched his jaw. "You talk big for someone who just got here," he said. Amara finally stood. She was shorter than him, but she didn't step back. "You pick on me because I'm different," she said quietly. "That's not strength. That's cowardice." Seo Jin felt heat rush up his neck. No one ever talked to him like that. Not the teachers, not the students. Even the older kids gave him space because everyone knew who his father was. Behind his anger was something else he hated feeling. Uncertainty. "You should watch how you talk to me," he muttered. "Why?" Amara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "Because your dad is scary," she continued. "Because people are afraid of you?" A couple of students nearby quickly looked away. Seo Jin's eyes hardened. "You don't know anything about my father." Amara crossed her arms. "I don't need to," she said. "I can see what he did to you." For a second, something flickered across Seo Jin's face. Then it vanished. His friends waited for him to shove her, to say something crueler to prove who he was. Instead, he leaned closer. "You think you're brave," he said quietly. Amara met his gaze. "No," she replied with a smirk. "I just don't scare easy." The bell rang sharply across the courtyard. Students began to scatter toward the buildings. Seo Jin stared at her for another long moment. Then he scoffed and stepped back. "Whatever," he muttered, turning away. His friends hurried after him, but halfway across the courtyard, Seo Jin glanced back. Amara had already picked up her book again, like the moment hadn't mattered, like he hadn't mattered. For some reason, that irritated him more than anything she'd said. Across the courtyard, Amara turned a page, but she wasn't reading. She had a feeling that wouldn't be the last time Seo Jin tried to test her, and next time, She'd be ready. The cafeteria buzzed with a dull roar, metal trays clattering, sneakers squeaking against tile, bursts of laughter echoing through the chatter. Amara Carter sat at a corner table, laughing softly with her two friends, Mina and Ji-yoon, her curls haloed in the pale overhead light. She'd learned to like her hair here, how it puffed and coiled, how it refused to flatten or hide. It made her feel alive, even when eyes followed her down the hallways, and some eyes always did. Jin swept in with his usual entourage, 3 boys trailing behind, loud, smug, owning the space just because they could. They picked the table right behind hers. Amara's laughter dimmed as she straightened her back, spoon pausing midair. Mina's voice faltered. "Just ignore them," she murmured. "I do," Amara whispered back, though her hand tightened on her fork. Behind them, the boys' conversation rose and fell in waves of exaggerated laughter. The sound grated, empty yet cutting in its precision. Something about it felt rehearsed. Then ping. A single phone went off, then another, then 20. The cafeteria's noise thinned into uneasy murmurs. Around the room, students looked down at their screens. Reactions flickered like dominoes. Some snorted and traded phones. Others glanced toward Amara, pity etched across their faces. "What's going on?" Ji-yoon asked, frowning. Amara's pulse started to race. A teacher somewhere near the vending machine called for quiet, but no one listened. Mina froze. The color drained from her face. "No," she whispered, eyes wide. She turned her phone toward Amara. There it was, a candid shot of Amara from that morning, her hair big and glorious, caught in the sharp light from the classroom window. Someone had edited lightning bolts around her head, like she'd stuck her finger into an outlet. Bold white letters stretched across the image. "When you find the nearest socket instead of a salon." Her breath caught. The photo felt like a slap, the entire cafeteria a gaping mouth of laughter swallowing her whole. She turned, and he was already watching her. Jin, leaning back, grinning, holding up his own phone where the meme still glowed. Something inside her surged. Anger, humiliation, grief, all tangled in heat. "You think you're funny?" Her voice shook, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. He tilted his head. "Relax, it's just a joke." Before he could finish, she slapped the phone from his hand. It hit the floor hard, the screen splintering into spiderweb cracks. The sound echoed. The cafeteria gasped. Trays froze midair. "Enough!" A teacher's voice cut through like a blade. "You two, office, now!" They sat outside the principal's office in silence, the whispers of students and administrators fading behind the shut door. Amara kept her eyes forward, hands folded in her lap, jaw locked. Jin watched her from the corner of his eye, irritation burning where shame tried to settle. She wasn't crying, not the way he expected, but the quiet tears that slid down her cheek made him restless. "You're seriously crying over a meme?" he muttered finally. "People make jokes. My father says only the weak." She turned to him then, eyes red but steady. "Then maybe your father's never been laughed at by a whole room for just being himself." He said nothing. Couldn't. A minute later, a woman appeared at the door. Amara's mother, tall and composed, her presence somehow louder than any shout. Amara rose and followed her into the office without another word. When she came out again, she didn't look at him. Not once. Just walked past, head high, dignity intact. That was the last time he saw her. Later, when a man in a black suit came in his father's place, Jin said nothing. Not about the meme, not about Amara. At home, his father only scowled. "You embarrassed the family," he said. "Not because of the girl, because you got caught." But that night, in the dark, Jin saw the meme again in his mind, and the look in Amara's eyes just before she turned away. It stayed with him longer than the punishment, longer than the suspension. It stayed like truth, neither the joke nor his father could erase.
Will Jin rise above the boy who once broke Amara? Or is he doomed to repeat the past? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
15 years later. It's 9 p.m. Seo Jin's BMW slides through Hongdae's narrow streets, the dashboard lights bleeding pale blue across his knuckles. The city hums, neon reflected in puddles from an earlier rain. He's fresh from a meeting that nearly erupted into bloodshed, words sharp as blades, tempers shorter still. He should go home to his penthouse overlooking the Han River, but the thought of silence and glass walls feels unbearable. He's restless, voltage under his skin. For a split second, he almost wishes for someone foolish enough to test him, just so he can release what coils in his chest like lightning waiting for ground. That's when he sees it. A coffee shop called Solace, its sign written in English, Hangul script glowing beneath it. Inside, warm light spills across shelves, books, and the soft outlines of people seated in a half circle. Someone stands at the center, reading aloud. On impulse, Seo Jin pulls over. No bodyguards tonight, just himself, breathing freely for once. The bell above the door jingles as he steps in. The low murmur of poetry and espresso machines mixes like jazz. Then he freezes. Behind the counter, wiping down mugs, stands a woman with sunlit skin and eyes he's never forgotten. Amara Carter. Her name ignites memory like static. 15 years gone, and still the syllables burn. The girl he humiliated in middle school, the only person who ever looked at him without fear. He wonders if she'd smile like that if she knew who stood in front of her. But she doesn't recognize him. "Welcome to Solace," she says, voice warm as honey. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Tea?" He stares, a heartbeat too long, before forcing himself to glance up at the chalkboard. "Ethiopian Yirgachev. Pour over." She chuckles lightly. "You must have a long night ahead." He watches, entranced, as she moves, measured, focused, ritualistic, weighing beans, pouring water in slow circles, steam breathing up like incense. Her locks are gathered into a high. Ponytail threaded with gold cuffs and tiny cowrie shells. Everything about her moves with purpose, grace, the opposite of the chaos pulsing under his skin. She hands him the mug. "Enjoy. Ethiopian Yirgachev has such a unique flavor. I think you'll like it. You're welcome to join our poetry night if you have time." Seo Jin nods, retreating to a small table in the corner. From there, he can listen unseen. The space feels alive, potted plants in every corner, tall shelves holding both roasted beans and well-loved books. The walls are memory themselves, photographs of Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, and a framed quote that reads, "We are our ancestors' wildest dreams." A vintage lamp throws a golden pool of light over the group. The man at the center, thin, spirited, is performing something raw about love and loss. The others lean forward, caught between laughter and reverence. Seo Jin's gaze returns inevitably to Amara. She moves to lock the front door, laughter rippling through the room as a British voice calls out, "All right, Amara, it's your turn. You promised." Amara groans playfully, reaching for a battered notebook on the shelf. All right, I'm coming." She steps into the circle, voice shy at first, then blooming. Her words fall like rhythm-made flesh, soft but unshaken. From his seat, Seo Yoon feels something he hasn't in years, a pull toward grace and the sting of regret. The storm inside him quiets. For the first time in his adult life, he wonders if redemption could smell like coffee and sound like poetry in a Seoul café named Solace. Amara walks to the center of the group, notebook in hand. A few people cheer, snapping fingers in rhythm, teasing her gently until she blushes and shakes her head. The laughter is affectionate, familiar. She opens her battered notebook and the air changes, like the room itself knows to listen. The espresso machine exhales softly behind her, but everything else falls still. Then, in a voice rich as late-night jazz, she says, "This is called My Crown." Seo Jin doesn't breathe. The sound of her voice pours over him like warm honey over stone, smoothing sharp edges he didn't know he was carrying. She stands tall now, confidence radiating from quiet grace. Heavy is the head that wears my crown, yet I hold it high. She tilts her chin up slightly, and their eyes meet. It's only for a moment, yet something magnetic hums between them. It is too real, too natural, she continues. A reminder that I stand on a spectrum whose every inch is beautiful with no ugly between its ends. Her words vibrate like a dare. Seo Jin feels it in his pulse, that same defiance she had as a girl, sharpened now into something dazzling. He wonders if she knows who's watching her from the dim corner, or if she's speaking to ghosts that share her past, his specter among them. My crown is history. Its corn-road paths once mapped out freedom, its coils know the language of survival, and my afro lifts to kiss the sun as if greeting an old friend. From the couch, a curvy woman with a short afro snaps her fingers. "Yas, queen!" Laughter ripples through the room. Amara's radiant smile blooms wide before she continues. My crown is divine. It answers to those who wish to see me differently, telling them I am fearfully, wonderfully made in God's image, not in theirs, crafted with intention, shaped by something greater than their gaze. Silence deepens again. Even the hum of the espresso machine fades into reverence. Every soul in the café seems to absorb each syllable like light. She raises a hand, flicks her locks with deliberate pride. My crown refuses to disappear. It will not blend in, just to quiet the truth of who I am. My locks stand firm, protesting every attempt to hush them, to make them hang limp at the feet of oppression. This crown is my inheritance, my rebellion, my glory, and I wear it without apology. When she stops, for a heartbeat, the room holds its breath. Then applause breaks like summer rain, rolling, joyful, unrestrained. Amara beams, her earlier bashfulness sliding briefly back into place as if she's tucking away the power that had, moments before, filled the room. She gives small bows, words of thanks lost in the noise. But as she looks up, her gaze finds Seo Jin again. This time she doesn't immediately look away. His hand stills around his mug. He nods once, slow and deliberate, before taking a sip. Her lips curve, softly, sincerely, and for the smallest instant, he could swear that smile is only for him. The crowd moves in around her, friends embracing, praising, snapping pictures, but Seo Yoon sits rooted in the corner's shadow. For all his power, his weapons, his wealth, he has never felt more powerless than in that moment, watching the woman he once wounded stand radiant and free, her voice resounding inside him like redemption itself. Applause fades gradually into the hum of voices, cups clinking, jazz stirring faintly from the speakers. Amara thanks the audience with a shy laugh, pressing her palm to her heart before making her way back behind the counter. Seo Jin watches her every move. The air feels different now, charged but calming, the kind of energy that lingers after lightning passes through. He still can't quite believe she's here, alive in color and confidence, the same girl he once destroyed with a single cruel act. Except she isn't the same. She's the embodiment of everything her poem declared, unapologetic, radiant, unshaken. He knows he should leave. His world is too dangerous for hers. But his feet, and something deeper, refuse. When she passes near his table with a tray of empty mugs, he clears his throat, forcing composure into his tone. That was powerful, he says in Korean first, then English, careful to soften his Seoul accent. Amara pauses, balancing the tray against her hip. Her expression brightens modestly. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. There's no recognition in her eyes, just warmth, a stranger's kindness. I don't usually read in front of new faces, she admits. You must have picked the right night to stop by. He smiles faintly, lowering his eyes before she can see too much. Yeah, guess I got lucky. Have we met before? She asks, head tilting slightly. You look a little familiar. The question hits like a quick blade, and he hides the flinch behind a calm breath. If she remembered, she'd never be speaking to him this way. No, he says smoothly. I don't think so. I'm Jin Han. Jin Han, she repeats with a thoughtful nod, as if testing how the name feels. Well, Jin Han, welcome to Solace. And just like that, she turns to serve someone else, unaware that the man sipping coffee in her café once made her life a quiet hell. Seo Jin watches her move through the warm light, graceful and utterly free, while his own reflection stares back at him in the darkened window beside his table. He tells himself the alias is protection, for her, not him. But as her laughter mixes with the sound of spoons and soft conversation, he knows it's also an escape. Jin Han can be the man Seo Jin never learned how to be. The last of the poetry group drifted out into the night, their laughter fading beyond the glass door. The bell jingled one final time before settling into stillness. Amara began her familiar closing routine, a small ritual of peace after the bright noise of community. She stacked mugs, folded towels, let the soft, lo-fi track humming from the speakers fill the quiet. From the corner of her eye, she noticed the tall stranger, Jin Han, lingering near the black and white portrait on the far wall, her mother's portrait. He wasn't looking at the menu or the door. He was looking up, his expression unreadable but softened by something almost reverent. Amara told herself to keep working, to stay busy, but her eyes betrayed her. She stole a glance, then another. He was striking. Even from behind, he carried an easy authority, shoulders squared beneath a dark tailored jacket. His hair was thick, slightly tousled, as though he'd been running fingers through it all night. When he turned slightly, the warm light caught his angular jaw and the faint shadow of stubble, sharp lines softened by introspection. His skin carried a faint olive undertone, that smooth, soul-born polish of privilege, yet his eyes, when she remembered them meeting hers earlier, were shadowed by storms. Beautiful, but troubled. She wondered briefly what story those eyes would tell if he ever let someone read them. "All right, sis," came Kelly's teasing voice from behind the counter, jolting Amara from her daze. "You're not going to meet Mr. Man of Mystery standing over here ogling him from behind a milk frother." Amara shot her best friend a mock glare. "Excuse you, I was wiping the counter." "The same spot you've been wiping for 5 minutes?" Kelly loosened her apron and grabbed her keys. "I'm going to be in the car. Lock up and make sure you bring some tea that's worth the wait." She wiggled her eyebrows meaningfully before heading out, the bell jingling behind her. Yeah, Amara called after her, rolling her eyes but smiling. Gathering her courage, bracing against the flutter that rose in her chest, she crossed the quiet space. The shadows were long now, falling softly across the floorboards. She stopped just behind and to the side of him. "Your mother is beautiful," Seo Jin said without turning, his voice low, thoughtful. The words came more from memory than from the photograph in front of him. "Her eyes are kind." "Yes," Amara murmured, her gaze lifting to the portrait, a smiling woman holding a steaming mug, eyes full of warmth. "I miss her every day. She was the inspiration for Solace. Whenever I was down or stressed about life, we'd sit and talk over a cup of coffee and somehow things wouldn't seem so bad. If I can pass on even a fraction of that comfort—" She hesitated, her throat tightening. "Then I'll know I've done my part to add a little more light to the world." Seo Jin turned slightly toward her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, dark and liquid, held something heavy in their depths. He studied her for a beat, memorizing every flicker of the candlelight reflected there. "When did she pass?" he asked softly. 3 years ago." She drew a quiet, steady breath. "Cancer." He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Something invisible passed between them in that moment, an understanding, fragile but unmistakable. The silence was filled with it, charged and alive, like a wire humming beneath their words. Amara caught herself, startled by the intensity building in her chest. She looked away, clearing her throat, forcing a small laugh. "Well, it's getting late, and I should lock up, so I can be up bright and early tomorrow." Seo Jin inclined his head, the ghost of a smile brushing his lips. "Of course. Thank you for the coffee." She nodded, retreating behind the counter, suddenly aware of how fast her heart was beating. As he walked toward the door, the bell jingled again, a soft punctuation to the night. The air he left behind still carried his cologne, faint and smoky, like rain on asphalt. Amara exhaled, staring at the portrait of her mother and whispering under her breath, "Lord, what was that?" Outside, Jin paused on the sidewalk, glanced once more through the glass, and for the first time in 15 years felt the unfamiliar pull of something that wasn't power or fear, but the fragile, dangerous piece of wanting to be known.
Will Jin open his heart and allow Amara to truly know him? Or will his past and his present shatter the attraction growing? Keep listening to find out.
It was 8:50 p.m., and Solace had finally exhaled after another long day. Amara stood behind the counter, pretending not to look toward the front door for the 100th time. She kept busy restocking straws, wiping surfaces that didn't need wiping, and running through tomorrow's prep list in her mind. The day had been full, the morning rush of suits and briefcases, the afternoon tide of college students hunched over textbooks, laptops, and oat milk lattes, and finally, the 7 o'clock stragglers, freelancers, friends, and the lone keyboard warriors tapping through the quiet. Now, at last, the café softened into its evening rhythm, nearly empty except for a few customers half lost in their phones. Still, Amara's nerves hummed. She forced herself to turn away from the door and focus on the milk and syrup rack when Kelly appeared, watching her in mock disbelief. "I can't believe it." "Can't believe what?" Amara asked absently, shoving another handful of straws into an already full holder. "That you're checking for your man of mystery tonight." Amara nearly dropped the dispenser. "First of all, he is not my man." "Yet," Kelly interjected, grinning. "And second of all, his name is Jin Han," Amara said, smirking at her friend's relentless teasing. Only Kelly could spot her nerves this easily. Everyone else believed she was unflappable, steady as stone. Kelly, though, had known her since their college days at the University of Seoul. Amara majoring in business, Kelly in communications, where she'd learned to charm professors and debate rooms alike. Her cocoa skin gleamed under the soft cafe lights, her afro picked perfectly round, haloing her radiant smile. On busy days, she worked the counter with Amara, her laughter loud enough to make customers' heads turn. It's about time someone came along and claimed your attention," Kelly teased, tying off her apron. "Everyone can't have a berry, Miss Thang," Amara shot back, laughing. Kelly flashed that dazzling grin. She'd been dating Barry, a U.S. Army lieutenant, for 2 years now. Everyone suspected a proposal was coming soon, while Amara couldn't wait to celebrate. For her friend, she secretly dreaded the emptiness that would follow when Barry whisked Kelly off to whichever duty station came next. "You should let me hook you up with one of Barry's buddies, if your man of mystery doesn't work out," Kelly baited. Before Amara could reply, the doorbell jingled. "Speak of the devil," Kelly murmured, slipping into the back storage room with a knowing grin. Amara felt her pulse quicken as the door swung open. Jin Han filled the space with quiet confidence. She could smell rain and cologne clinging to him, subtle but captivating. "Second night in a row?" she asked, lighting up with her brightest smile. "That Ethiopian Yirgacheffe a pour-over is something else, isn't it?" Jin's mouth curved into a small, knowing smirk. "I'll have another one, please." "Have a seat. It'll be coming right up." Amara turned away before his gaze could undo her composure, but she could feel it tracing her steps as she worked, the way a flame senses oxygen. Heat rose from the tips of her toes to her cheeks as she walked the steaming mug over to his table. "Here you go," she said softly, setting it before him. His hand brushed hers, lingering just long enough to send a spark racing through her veins. "Sit," he said simply. His tone wasn't unkind, but it carried a quiet authority, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. Amara hesitated, then slipped into the chair across from him, pretending not to notice how her heart fluttered. The background music shifted. Kelly's doing, no doubt, to a slow, velvety neo-soul track that wrapped the room in warm rhythm. Jin took a sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "Your poem last night," he said after a beat, "was compelling. What inspired it?" Amara blinked, caught off guard. "Wow, you're not one for idle small talk, are you?" He tilted his head slightly. "If it's too personal?" "No," she interrupted, smiling shyly as she tucked a lock behind her ear. No man had ever looked at her quite this way, seeing her, really seeing her. The effect was disarming. She hesitated, then let the admission slip free. "I came to Seoul when I was 13. My dad was military, so we came with him. After my parents divorced, my mom and I stayed. Middle school was hard. It's a difficult time for anyone, figuring yourself out, but being in a new country, new culture, new school, it magnifies everything. I wanted to fit in, to feel beautiful. But my skin, my features, my hair..." She gave a soft, wistful laugh. "They didn't let me blend in, even when I wanted to." She looked down at the table, bracing herself for pity. Instead, what she found in his gaze was something tender, almost reverent. "How did you learn to embrace your breathtaking beauty?" he asked quietly. Her breath caught. "Who says I have?" she whispered. She folded her trembling hands in her lap, smiling faintly. "It's still a journey. That poem was a reminder. To myself." A gentle silence followed, thick with something she didn't quite know how to name. Then, as if sensing the weight in the air, Amara exhaled and playfully changed her tone. "Well, enough of story time and me spilling all my secrets." She rose to her feet with the empty mug in hand, her composure returning in degrees. "Next time, it's your turn." She flashed him a teasing grin. He smiled back, an expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Amara turned, walking toward the counter, her heartbeat outpacing her steps. Behind her, Jin sat silently, the untouched dregs of coffee cooling between his hands, his mind replaying every word she'd said, each one pressing against the secret he carried like a bruise that refused to fade.
Amara has spilled the tea of her childhood to Jin, still not recognizing him as her childhood bully. Can these former enemies become lovers? Comment below on whether you think Jin has a real shot at finding a love connection with Amara.
The day had come at him like a blade. A deal gone sideways, a shipment delayed, and a distributor too brave or too foolish for his own good. By nightfall, Jin's patience was stripped down to wire. The black BMW slid silently through crowded Hongdae streets, his reflection glinting in passing neon signs, jaw tight, eyes cold enough to cut glass. He should have driven straight to his penthouse overlooking the river, signed off on reports, called his father's old lieutenant, handled business. But as the city blurred by, muscle memory turned the wheel to a quieter street. Solace. He barely registered the decision until he saw its soft light pooling onto the street like a secret, without guards, without noise. When he stepped inside, the wind chime above the door tinkled against the low hum of conversation and poetry. The warm, spiced air hit him immediately. Coffee, cardamom, comfort. He knew people noticed him. It was hard not to, but no one dared stare outright. Except perhaps Amara, whose gaze flicked up from behind the counter. Her smile usually met everyone like sunrise, but tonight it gentled, softening in quiet understanding. She didn't ask how he was. She didn't speak at all. She simply began to make his coffee, wordless, calm. Her small hands moved precisely, measuring beans, pouring water in slow circles, steam curling into the room's golden light. Jin felt the tension begin to unclench, just slightly, watching her. He took his usual seat in the back, beside the tall shelf of books and plants. The group had already gathered in the center, voices low and intimate, candles flickering on the coffee table. The British woman was first tonight, Elise. He'd learned her name last week. Her accent lilted around the verses like music as she read from her tablet, a meditation on missing home yet belonging everywhere at once. The lines spilled smooth and wistful, thick with nostalgia. After her came Kelechi, the Nigerian engineer with a poet's heart and a voice that could boom or cradle depending on his mood. His poem was a love letter to Lagos traffic of all things, chaotic, vital, alive. And by the end the group was snapping fingers, laughter mingling with applause. Then Kelly took the stage, hips swaying, hair gleaming under the lamp. Her poem, bold and brash, was a hilarious ode to dating disasters in Seoul. The room shouted and laughed, heads shaking, glasses clinking against saucers. Even Jin found the edge of his mouth softening. The moment she finished, the atmosphere gentled. Amara was next. She stood, notebook in hand, her eyes darting toward him for the briefest second before she looked away, as though touching something too hot to linger on. "Volcanic glass," she began, her voice smooth, controlled. "Born where the earth remembers its own fire. Forged under pressure, the heat remakes it, turns chaos into edge, fragility into force. Its sharpness whispers of survival, of what it means to endure the breaking and emerge unbroken." Her words sank into him like heat finding old wounds. Jin felt a tremor beneath the armor he wore against the world. Amara's voice was a siren's, tender and dangerous all at once, drawing him in, speaking truths he would never confess aloud. She continued, steady now. Yet for all its jagged power, its plains lie smooth, placid as undisturbed water, black and quiet, reflecting everything but revealing nothing. The air thickened. Jin recognized himself in every word, and for a fleeting instant it terrified him. Then jingle. The bell above the door broke the spell. His jaw twitched at the sight. His right hand, Min-jae, stepping inside. Tall, lean, his polished shoes clicking like gunfire against the floorboards. His expression was carefully blank, but his eyes darted between Amara and his boss. A silent apology. Amara's voice faltered for half a breath, then regained its rhythm. Min-jae approached quietly, bowing his head toward Jin. "Hyungnim," he murmured, using the private title. "Forgive the interruption. There's an issue. At the dock. The Russians are demanding renegotiation before release." The words yanked Jin back to the life he'd tried to leave at the door. He stood slowly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Without shouting, without a single harsh word, his mere posture changed the air, his calm now. A warning, his silence sharper than threat. Conversations around them faltered, laughter dimmed. Amara closed her notebook, eyes flicking toward him, shadows of concern threading through her calm. Jin inclined his head toward her in silent apology. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice gentler than she might have expected. Then he turned to Min-jae. "Let's go." The two men left through the door, the bell jingling behind them. Outside, the night swallowed him up again, the warmth of Solace fading with every step toward the car. For a moment, Jin paused before sliding into the back seat, glancing at the cafe's window glowing softly in the dark. Just one small sanctuary, and not even he could keep from burning it. 3 days passed, and still he didn't come. The chair in the back corner of Solace stayed empty, the ghost of his presence occupying it just the same. Amara told herself she didn't care, that she barely knew him, just a man who liked good coffee and poetry. And yet, every evening around 9 o'clock, her eyes flicked toward the door whenever the bell chimed, her heart skipping before settling again in disappointment. She hated the way her mind kept looping back to him, his quiet manner, the intensity behind his eyes, the suspicion that he lived with one foot in shadows. Maybe that explained why. Jin Han felt both magnetic and dangerous. Part of her hoped she'd imagined it. Another part wasn't so sure. She busied herself with the grinding and brewing and endless cleaning that kept her hands moving even when her thoughts refused to be still. When the mood threatened to crack her composure, she reminded herself of something her mother used to say, Still waters are stronger than waves. Kelly, of course, noticed. "Girl, you're wearing out that poor countertop," she called one night, arms folded, laughter in her voice. Amara arched an eyebrow. "Since when is cleanliness a crime?" "Since you started checking the door every 5 minutes," Kelly grinned. "Face it, you miss your mysterious caffeine addict." Amara rolled her eyes, though a smile broke through despite her efforts. "He's just a customer, Kelly." "Sure he is." When the laughter died down and Kelly went home, the cafe felt unusually quiet. Amara turned off most of the lights, keeping only the soft glow under the menu board. The hum of the refrigerator filled the stillness. For a moment, she let herself admit it. She did miss him. Maybe not the man exactly, but the strange calm he brought into the space. It was the next afternoon when the men arrived. 2 of them, immaculate suits, determined smiles. They moved like men who already owned whatever they touched. "Owner in?" the taller one asked as they stepped up to the counter. "That's me," Amara said evenly. "What can I do for you?" He smiled, all teeth and charm. "We came with a business opportunity. We represent a group interested in helping small enterprises manage cash flow more efficiently, lessen tax complications, very discreet." Her senses sharpened instantly. The phrasing was too smooth. She'd been in Seoul long enough to recognize when politeness carried poison. "I appreciate the offer," she said slowly, "but I'm not looking for investors." "Of course," said the second, his tone syrupy, "but we believe collaboration is in everyone's best interest. A partnership, you could say." He leaned in slightly. "You wouldn't want to make things harder on yourself, would you? Paperwork, inspections, landlord fees, these things pile up. We can keep them off your back." The implications sank in like a stone. Amara met his gaze head on. "This cafe doesn't need your help." Her voice was quiet but firm. The taller man smiled again, but his eyes had cooled. "Think about it. Everyone benefits when peace is kept." They left a thick black business card on the counter. No names, only a stylized gold emblem depicting a phoenix. Amara stared at it a long time after the doorbell chimed and silence returned. Her hands trembled slightly before she clenched them. There was fear. Yes, but deeper than that was anger, that hot, steady current that burned against injustice. She'd met their kind before, back in middle school, the ones who tested how much of your dignity you'd surrender if they pushed hard enough. She'd learned young she would never give them that satisfaction. That evening, she closed Solace with deliberate calm, double-checked the locks, and turned the closed sign over. Then she stood in the darkened shop for a long moment, breathing in the faint scent of roasted beans and lavender cleaner. Alone, but unbroken. "If Mama could face worse than this," she whispered into the quiet, "so can I." Then she flicked off the last light and stepped out into the Seoul night, carrying that determination with her like a shield.
Will Amara be able to stand her ground against adult bullies? Or will Solace become a front for money laundering? Leave a comment below telling me what you think will happen.
Hongdae's night pulse throbbed faintly outside the high-rise windows of Seo Jin's office. The lights of Seoul glittered like 1,000 quiet lies across the Han River, but he barely saw them. His jaw ached from staying clenched. The day had already bled him of patience. Min-jae stood on the far side of the desk, shoulders rigid. Beside him, 2 other lieutenants hovered in uneasy silence. The air held that particular stillness that came before violence. "You're telling me," Seo Jin said slowly, voice low, "that someone walked into my neighborhood and started shaking down a business owner under my protection?" The men exchanged glances. Min-jae bowed his head slightly. "The men were from Kang Dong-sik's crew, one of his street managers. They're using a few cafes and clubs to wash cash. Said they thought Solace was unclaimed territory." The name hit like acid. Kang Dong-sik, a rival boss who'd been testing boundaries ever since rumors spread that Seo Jin was shifting his focus away from the street level, consolidating, modernizing, becoming something cleaner. Weak in their eyes. And what did He stopped himself, fingers curling into a fist on the desk. What did the cafe owner say? She turned them down, quietly, firmly. Seo Jin's gaze unfocused for a beat. He could see her refusing, standing behind that mahogany counter, chin lifted, voice calm but unyielding. He'd seen the steel in her before, tucked under gentleness. That same fire was what had both shamed and entranced him as a boy, and it still burned now. Did they touch her? No, boss, Min-jae said quickly. They made a veiled threat, left a card. We picked one up after, Kang's insignia. Seo Jin reached for the black card on his desk. The gold phoenix gleamed under the light, insolent, mocking. His pulse thickened in his temples. He turned the card slowly between his fingers before sliding it into his jacket pocket. Bring me names, full list of every man at that meeting. Yes, sir. Not tomorrow, tonight. The room emptied quickly after that command. Min-jae lingered just long enough to speak what the others were too afraid to. Hyungnim, she doesn't know who you really are. Maybe it's better if it stays that way. Seo Jin didn't look up. If Kang sent men into my city, he made it my business, and therefore hers, whether she knows it or not. When the door closed, he stood and crossed to the floor-to-ceiling window. The reflection that stared back at him was sharp, expressionless. Yet beneath that calm, he knew something had shifted, a current he hadn't felt in years. He told himself this was about respect, territory, control. But another truth flickered in the depths of his chest. When he'd first stepped into Solace, he'd found the one place untouched by the kind of poison he commanded. He could still hear her voice from that night, soft, defiant. It will not blend in. My crown is my rebellion. Kang was trying to stain that, to test him, to see if he'd protect something good. Seo Jin turned from the glass, his decision already made. Call the car, he said into the quiet. His tone was measured, but Min-jae's men in the outer office froze. They knew that tone. When he left the building 10 minutes later, he carried no weapons and no entourage, just the black card in his pocket and an anger that was far more personal than he wanted to admit. The black sedan eased to a stop in the shadow of an abandoned riverfront warehouse once used for shipping containers. At this hour, Seoul's river district was mostly silence and sodium light, the music of the city replaced by the soft lap of the Han and distant traffic hum. Min-jae waited by the entrance, head bowed. They're inside, he murmured. Seo Jin said nothing, adjusting his cuffs as he stepped from the car. Without the weight of his usual security detail, he looked less a boss and more a weapon built of tension and precision. Inside the warehouse, a table had been dragged beneath a flickering bulb. 3 men waited, expensive suits, cheap bravado, the kind of small-time sharks who swam in circles around larger predators and mistook movement for power. Mr. Seo, one of them greeted, rising halfway, smile stitched in place. A surprise and an honor. We didn't expect— You didn't, Seo Jin interrupted pleasantly, voice soft but cutting. If you had, you wouldn't have used my district to test your boss's reach. The man's smile faltered. The others tensed. All I want to know, Seo Jin continued, walking closer, is which of you thought it wise to walk into a woman's business with threats? One of the men forced a nervous laugh. It was just a conversation, a misunderstanding. Seo Jin reached the table, placed both hands flat on its surface, and leaned in. His shadow swallowed them. I make my living from misunderstandings, he said. You'll forgive me for correcting them swiftly. The flickering bulb buzzed overhead. When it steadied again, 2 of the men were pressed against the concrete wall, Min-jae's hand twisted in a collar while another enforcer pinned the second's arm at an unnatural angle. Seo Jin stood close to the third, the talker, whose voice had gone dry. You walked into Solace, mentioned inspections, rent, noise complaints. Seo Jin's words dropped like pebbles into deep water. You know who lives on that street. You know whose peace you disturbed. Was that Kang Dong-sik's order or something you thought might earn his favor? It came from the top, the man stammered. Boss said the cafe looked clean, said to make an offer. Seo Jin nodded once, slow, absorbing every syllable. Then he smiled, a terrifyingly calm expression. Tell Kang Dong-sik 2 things for me, he said, stepping back. First, if he wants to move money through legitimate fronts, he can do it in Busan. Not Seoul, not my city. He waited, then leaned in again, his voice dropping to a whisper. Second, if he even says the word Solace again, I'll remind him how short a man's tongue can be when he offends me. The man swallowed hard, nodding so fast his glasses slipped from his face. Seo Jin turned toward Min-jae. Take their phones, wipe the last 2 days, leave them enough bones intact to walk home. Yes, Hyungnim. As Min-jae's men moved efficiently to obey, Seo Jin lit a cigarette. The tip glowed red, illuminating his face in brief scarlet flashes. For a long moment, he just stared out toward the black shimmer of the river through a cracked window. When he finally spoke, his voice was even calmer. No one touches her again. If anyone so much as crosses that threshold, I want to know before they finish telling you about it. Min-jae nodded. Understood. Seo Jin dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his shoe, and walked out into the cool night air. The ache in his chest had eased, replaced by something heavier. Clarity. What he felt toward Amara, whatever strange pull she had on him, was dangerous for both of them. But he'd seen that cafe's light once too often to let men like Kang turn it into ash. As he climbed into the waiting car, a faint trace of coffee still lingered on his sleeve. For a man like Seo Jin, that was the closest thing to prayer he would ever know.
If you've made it this far, you're my people. Let's make it official by you liking and subscribing to this channel. We'll meet again in part 2.